hello, boys, girls, and that technicolored rainbow in between. It is I, your host, Rehash, and I'm Gent.
And I'm Decipher!
What are you two doing here? What, it's our show too. It's too cluttered, get out!
But this is the final episode before we move on to something else.
I don't care. We want to see how it ends. Okay, fine, you can stay and watch. But we can't be all on the screen at the same time. Otherwise, it's just too cluttered and too much to work with. No promises.
3 beings of chaos. What could possibly go wrong?
So without further ado, this is the Beastmaster that was kicked out of the S-ranked party. Chapters 13
and 14.
The chapter begins where we meet the evil party. Are they really that evil, or are they just incompetent?
I'll go with lazy. After all, they pushed all the hard stuff onto Locks from the very beginning, right?
I guess you could call them the narcissistic party if you want, but I will just keep it simple and still call them the evil party. Well, they're discussing strategy at the moment, which their strategy is get the hardest thing first and then get the rest in the meantime when they have time. But they definitely notice an issue. All the other material, the eggs, the frogs, and the dragonflies, are nowhere to be seen. This puts the gladiator on high alert, thinking that maybe the guild is actually setting them up, which he's not wrong. But there's a rather different reason why there's no material left. But before he could process that,
Goblin attack! Roll initiative!
Not only is it a goblin attack, but the boss goblin shows up as well, and they're completely surrounded. Wait a minute, if I remember correctly, the small village did say something about goblins, didn't they? I guess it was just all around bad luck that the evil party managed to run into them.
Okay, so I think we can all agree that Lux already got the tail of the wyvern that he was supposed to get early. I think we can all agree on that. But how'd they manage to evade the goblins this entire time?
I don't think it was so much evade the goblins, more that it was the goblins didn't want to fuck with a dog deity. So the fight ensues. You can already tell that the gladiator's movements are too broad, too flashy, too over the top, and he's struggling with his opponent.
Of course, part of that could be that his head's not in the game. He keeps thinking back to when the hero said they're not as good as C-rank adventurers without Locks being in the party, and he can't seem to get his head focused on the task at hand.
So much so that he needed help from the wizard lady as the goblin gets shot in the back. And so, after getting chastised by the white mage, they proceed to take down the rest of the goblins. So it is clear they do have some skill. Well, yes, but every bad party gets a lucky break when it comes to goblins. And because the goblin knight was their boss, and now he's dead, they should have no problems moving forward. But it doesn't look like the gladiators taking that into account, because the real challenge is upon them.
Here come the wyverns!
So, Decipher, you're a D&D expert. How would you handle a situation like this, with this specific party?
Well, it wouldn't be ideal, but I suppose I could think of something that could work.
First, I would have the white mage use her abilities to plant small light-based explosives and noisemakers to distract the wyverns into several strategic locations, forcing them to separate and move around away from the nest. Then I would have the fighter go in, armed with grease and gnomish grenades, and plant them in strategic places, and then get as much doused in the oil and grease as much as they can, leading a trail back to a hiding spot, where the mage would set the trail on fire, in which case, when the wyverns came back, they would be met with a shower of fire and explosions, not enough to kill them, but enough to severely wound them, to make the fighting a lot easier. And if you can take a few out of the detonation, then by all means. Afterwards, you go in and kill the remaining stragglers, and then take their corpses and material for what you need, and some things that you don't need but might want in the future.
Or something like that, I don't know.
Well, their plan is nothing like the plan that you suggested, Decipher, as their plan is simply bait and switch. The gladiator would come running out, charging with his sword. The wyverns would attack him, and then the mages would fire their firebolts and deal the most damage from the rear, and so the gladiator can finish them off. This plan does seem to work at first, until it doesn't.
Classic rogue tactic. Wyverns sneak up for a sneak attack on the rear guard. They manage to drive it off and run away, but this leads to a bit of a falling out with the party.
Gladiator seems to be allergic to any sense of accountability when the white mage calls him out that he's the defender, he's the attacker, he should be defending them, while he blames it all on them, saying that even though they are rear guard, they should have basic defenses. After this, the white mage has had enough and decides to run off, dragging the fire mage with her. When the gladiator says, "Where you think you're going?" she tells him, "We're done. We are parting ways. Fuck this. We're out." Apparently, however, the girls leaving the party forces the gladiator to have a bit of a crash out. Seeing memories of his childhood where he was compared to Lox on all things. He's the better fighter. He's the better leader. You should be more like Lox. Lox, 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 Lox. So he has a bit of a grudge against the poor lad. I suppose that explains the treatment of him all these years, from the gladiator's point of view. Doesn't excuse the white mage or the fire mage, nor does it excuse him. It looks like then he decides if he can't win, he'll make sure everybody loses, and decides to launch the equivalent of a magical nuke. Okay, show, series, book, I'm done. I'm done trying to justify this. Okay, I am done. I can only suspend my sense of belief for so long before I have to ask the big questions, and this is where I draw the line. You're telling me that a beast tamer, whose job is beast taming, whose goal is beast taming, is a better swordsman than the gladiator. Better leader, I can believe that, but better swordsman? Are you joking? Yeah, I'm sad to say I'm starting to get some strong Kirito vibes as well.
Power levels are bullshit!
Well, the magical nuke is so big and so bright that it could actually be seen all the way from the tiny village. Lox decides to investigate, taking Shannon and Lucky with him, leaving the gargoyle and the ants behind. They go to the location of the wyverns, where they find the evil party barely scraping by. The gladiator sees Lox and immediately decides to rub it in his face that he destroyed the wyvern nest and all the wyverns in it. So even though they don't have the wyverns, he doesn't have any way of getting the wyverns either. So now no one can pass the test. And he's saying he's wasting his time by even still going in to investigate to see if there's even any wyvern parts left. And so, the evil party limps away thinking that they are triumphant. Though, Lox's vacant expression kinda suggests that he already got the wyvern stingers.
I think we all already agreed on that.
So after investigating the bodies of the goblins that somehow survived the nuke, they decide to go in to investigate the wyvern nest itself. And sure enough, it's completely demolished.
Total ground zero.
Yes, but not all is lost.
For you see, if Lucky is good at finding anything, he finds eggs. Wyvern eggs.
Well, I guess I win our bet on the timeline of when he gets a dragon. I'm less concerned about that and more interested in how the hell did those wyvern eggs survive a nuclear bomb going off. So after collecting the dragon's eggs, wyvern eggs, don't care, they decide to stay in the village for a little while longer to help develop it more since they still have a bit of time before the due date. And as time went by, they turned the village into a stronghold, so no monster could ever dare threaten it again. And so the villagers thank Lox and Shannon for all their hard work, as well as the special thanks to the gargoyle Lucky and the ant siblings. and they said they can come back to the village at any time they desire. Lox will take them up on this offer, but first, there's one thing left to settle. The battle of his old party. P is for priceless, the looks upon their faces. E is for excuses for the consequences they'll be facing.
R is for revenge, which will be great to see.
F is for how fucked they are, for how long this has been building. The chapter begins with Lox, Shannon, and party arriving back in the capital, where they meet their old friend from the village that they helped. Apparently, this guy who originally was the one who took the health potion now set up shop selling cabbage and cabbage-based merchandise, soup, foods, and other necessities. And he has established himself. He even gives Lox his rightful payment for not only helping out the village, but also getting him a sweet deal. But enough lore about the origin of the cabbage merchant. It's time to get to the meat of what we actually came to see. The revenge against the evil party.
You know, that guy is looking awfully smug for someone who could only bring back wyvern stingers and nothing else.
Well, actually, how did he get the items? We clearly saw that he was struggling to even get one. How did he get all of them? Clearly, there is some shenanigans being held here. But more importantly, we see the gladiator bragging about his accomplishment and calling Lox a wuss. And saying that before the final appraisal, he should just sit there and bow and apologize to him in the meantime to save the effort and the trouble. I'm sorry, apologize for what exactly? If I recall correctly, you're the ones who ditched him, you're the ones who treated him like shit, and you're the ones who left him for dead after attempting killing him. What exactly does he have to apologize for? Oh, the usual bits. Oh, you humiliated me, you put me through all these problems, you threatened to take away my S-rank status to prove I'm superior to you. Which is just, superficial reasons. This is just a power trip for this boy. And I do mean boy.
'Cause no man would do this.
Not that any of that would actually matter.
'Cause apparently, despite the fact that the evil party had gotten all the requirements for the test and submitted them on time, Lox is still the winner!
And when the gladiator asks how is that possible, the receptionist simply says, while yes, you did get all the material and turned it on time, yeah, Lox kind of beat you to it and got several dozen more of what was required. The gladiator, of course, tries to deny reality, because that's impossible. He arrived after they did to the dungeon. He grabs Lox and says that he must have cheated and colluded with the guild. But Lox stands up for himself, saying that he did no cowardly tactics, and if anyone did, it was him.
But of course, the gladiator denies this. But Lox is able to show evidence, taking a bit of what he gathered. He presents the fact that the dragonfly feather that he managed to get has the seal of the village that he helped out,
which definitely catches the gladiator off guard. Apparently, the gladiator had simply bought all the material and tried to pass it off as if he got it from the quests, when in fact, he just simply bought it from the guild just to give it back to the guild. And Lox was able to figure this out because there's a merchant in town that is on his side and knows these things. In short, not only did they lose, but they spent a shit ton of money on material that they didn't even gather themselves. But then there's the question, how did you arrive at the dungeon before us? Simple, they took the shortcut through the swamp, unlike them who went around it. And they didn't know about it.
Well, one of them did. The white mage. Apparently she knew about it from the beginning. And when the gladiator confronted her about it and why she didn't say anything, she simply says, 1, I didn't want to get dirty, and 2, I don't like you. because at this point you can't even see the truth in front of your face. You're the only one in our evil party that wants to beat Lox.
Hot damn! Friendly fire!
Not one on that one! Holy shit!
Oh, there's no recovery from that one. That gladiator sunk no matter what. So while the gladiator pouts, Locke also reveals that apparently the goblin slaying mission that the village that he helped out couldn't afford was also part of the guild's plan, because even though they couldn't make an official mission because no payment, they did use this opportunity to dispose of the goblins, proving that this guildmaster plays like 12D chess at this point with everyone and everything just fell right into place. And all the receptionist does is grin. We also hear that Shannon and the ants were secretly going into the Wyvern nest and taking things and avoiding the dangerous outcomes of the monsters, while he just allowed the gladiator to charge right in and destroy the goblins for them. This sets off the gladiator, and he tries to throw a punch to destroy Lox once and for all.
Yeah, keep in mind he still has Lucky in his wristband.
And the ants. And a gargoyle. And Shannon is right there. On top of that, Lox is strong enough to take a nuclear bomb. And, of course, we have the guild receptionist. So yeah, this is a really dumb move. But before he can land the punch, the guildmaster shows up.
And he reveals that Kid confessed to everything, including the plans that they were complicit in the incident where Lox almost died.
And so this is truly the end of the evil party, and the gladiator is forced to bow down and submit. It's finally all over. But there was no cheers on Locke's end. It's a rather somber tone. But then we hear the aftermath. The police, or knights rather, came to question the evil party on everything that happened, and so the sentencing was carried out. As for the girls, the mages and the white mage, they got the least amount of sentence, though it's clear that their skills were not high enough for an S rank. They were dropped to C, and their party was officially disbanded. They tried to form another party with Lox, but he declined, much to their chagrin. So they formed a party with each other, because, might as well. And they decided to start their training all the way from the ground up. There's hope for the fire mage,
but I wouldn't get my hopes up of her redemption.
Not yet, anyway. Kid, however, is locked away in prison as punishment for his crimes, as well as they do investigations on any further crimes that he's done, and he officially had his hero status revoked. As for the gladiator, well, he wasn't kicked out of the guild, but he was demoted all the way back to F rank, and he was forced to work the mines for an undisclosed amount of time, clearly several months. And once he returns, he'll have to start his adventuring journey all the way from the ground up. As for Lox, well, Lox is lamenting on his past with Lucky. Everything that happened with his childhood friends, their bonds breaking down, they may have been friends, but they never really understood each other. And that makes Lox filled with regret.
But now that he's part of a new party, he wants to use those regrets to fuel being a better person.
And so, he continues to put his trust in his newfound party, his newfound friends, and strengthening each other. And moving forward, they act as one. And thus they run off to the rest of their party and have a nice picnic, with the rest of their lives ahead of them. Little do they know that the next events that would occur will be taking place very, very soon. But I think this is a good stopping point, and we can review these chapters at a later date. To be honest, I really enjoyed this series. The animals were adorable and were the ultimate selling point.
It honestly made me want to play a D&D character that has a pact familiar.
And watching the hope and light leave from the evil party and the hero's eyes when they see just how much better off Locks is without them and how much they depend on him was the icing on the cake. But no rose is without its thorns. Yeah, as much as I love the cute animals, I do have to admit, I'm not sure if I'm 100% on board with Locks. If I have to pin down his personality, I would just call him generic nice and generic good guy. Which really doesn't make all that interesting of a protagonist, but it does make a great self-insert. I was also getting a lot of mixed signals from the evil party. You know, sometimes they had the, oh, we're going to crush him, we don't want him, we don't need him, but other times they were just like, oh, won't you come back, we miss you, we need you. Getting a lot of mixed signals. If I had to describe this story as anything, I would call it more on the lines of a classic Disney movie. Something that you'd see in Snow White or Cinderella, where the main characters are bland as shit, and all the side characters are super interesting and entertaining, and the villains are completely unredeemable.
You also have to suspend your sense of disbelief a lot. I mean, a lot. Like, you really expect me to just sit there and believe that for some odd years, he had no way of knowing how to use his power, but the exact moment his party betrays and abandons him, all of a sudden his powers unlock, and all of a sudden he's collecting beasts like they're Pokemon. That's just unbelievable!
And let's not forget all of his insane feats, like being able to put up a basic shield to stop a freaking Kamehameha. And while I do find the ant children completely and utterly adorable, their existence frustrates me to no end, because it's never explained why they're the odd men out and why they get humanoid forms while the other beasts get to remain beasts. So, bottom line, I would say this was a good read. Not a great read, but a good one. Yeah, I'd give it a B-, C+.
It's A-okay if you really want to.
Just don't get your hopes up. And with that, I am Rehash, the stirrer of chaos.
And I'm Gent, the organizer of chaos. And I'm Decipher, the ruler of chaos.
No, that doesn't work.
Oh.
And we'll see you next time.
Bye-bye!